Hello everyone, this is my presentation on how to create, or at least point you in the right direction. I'm not going to tell you exactly how to create a select response test, but I am going to give you some guidelines in this presentation. I'm hoping this is one that you will all watch. I know some of my presentations you don't need to watch. You can go and look at the PowerPoint presentation, but in this one I'm also going to be talking about exemplars. I'm going to be talking about the rubric. I'm going to be also showing the checklist for item writing. So it's a pretty important video presentation to watch. So here we go. As you all know, you're going to be required to write a selected response test on the EdTPA special education. The exemplars that I have are from the EdTPA elementary education, so they're a little different. But it's good because you can't use those to create your own, although I would hope you would use them to guide you, because I'm going to use one of them anyway to show you what I expect. All right, so the first thing we do when creating any test is to figure out why we're using it. And there are many reasons for using our tests. It's like using the state assessments. A lot of people say, we don't get them back till the kids are all gone. Well, that's not their purpose. Their purpose is accountability, number one. The second use of them can be program evaluation. Are we teaching what we're supposed to be teaching, because the state assessments are based on our standards, the Common Core standards. So you have to figure out why you're using this, because it will determine how you go. Is it going to be for diagnostic reasons? Are you creating it as a pretest or as a pretest post-test? And those are formative purposes. To use it summatively, that's what you're going to create for this test. This is the test that after you're done allegedly teaching the EdTPA, you're going to give a test on it. In this case, you're not teaching it, you're just going to give the test. You can also use these kind of tests for progress monitoring. Remember though, progress monitoring for response to intervention has to be small bits that are so that you can measure progress weekly or bi-weekly or twice a week. So they need to be fine-tuned so they can get small gains and improvement. So you want to see if what you're doing pretty quickly is making any difference. So that's progress monitoring. That's another purpose. The second step is to identify your learning targets. Now these are objectives. You'll see I will go into the exemplar. I believe I have an exemplar here ready to go. I am splicing this little piece in because I wanted to go into more detail about creating learning targets that are specific and measurable. This is a part of the creating the selected response test that is the most important, and it's the most important for your lesson. It's the most important when you go into and start doing the EdPA to become certified, is creating learning targets that are specific and measurable. And the key to these is the verb. Many of you will want to say students will understand how to do the assessment part of the EdTPA. Students will need to know how to plan for the EdTPA, plan a lesson. Those are vague. Everything that I have, all my resources say that don't avoid using words like appreciate, will know how to, will understand. Don't use those verbs. I've provided resources for you in the, this is the session 6 course materials. Let me just go back. This is session 6. Go into course materials and you'll see that I have this video, which I'm editing right now, but in the handouts I have a lot of things that will help you There's the rubric, and you can see the very first part of the rubric is targets are stated clear, focused, and listed at the beginning of the test. So your learning targets need to be specific and measurable. Here is chapter 4 and 5, which goes into creating learning targets and how to create a selective response test. This is another pamphlet about creating selective response tests. And here are your exemplars, and I'm going to show a couple of those right now. This is exemplar number 1, and you can see that the verbs are very clear. The student will be able to accurately explain, accurately describe, accurately explain. Student will be able to accurately identify. So those are the verbs: identify, explain, describe, that you need. This person didn't put weighting in for her targets, but that's not part of the rubric, so you're not going to lose points. But this is part of your blueprint that I should be able to look at your test, your targets, and see which ones are weighted more than others. I have another exemplar here that does just that. You can see that the targets are weighted, 7 questions, 28 points, 4 points each. So that you can see that the second target is weighted more than the others, 36 points compared to 28 points and 20 points. So that's important. That tells me which one of your learning targets you are going to weight or consider the most important. So that is a key, that you need to write your learning targets specific and measurable. I have resources that will help you. In this same course materials in session 5, you'll see here are exemplar SR selective response test, resources for creating learning targets, how to write learning objectives. That's also down here right below. Tips for writing behavioral objectives, and verbs for writing behavioral objectives, which is also down here below. And so you have resources that will help you make your learning targets clear and measurable. You'll see when I give you feedback, many of you who won't, I'll be able to tell you didn't watch this video because you will have verbs like understand, appreciate, know how to, which are vague and not specific and measurable. So I also wanted to just let you know that you should organize your test by question type. And you'll notice how this person, she coded her questions. Like this matching section is for learning target 1, LT1. That way you only have to put your instructions once. As I think this is exemplar number 2, you can see that this person has organized it by EdTPA tasks, which isn't really what you're supposed to do. You need to organize it. It just happens that each of these 4 objectives are about the EdTPA tasks. But you should organize them by your question type and then code the learning targets, LT1, LT2, and then put it after your question. So that's all. That's what I want to edit in here. Your learning targets need to be specific and measurable, with good verbs, good action verbs, and also weighted so I can tell which is most important. That's it. And then you're going to write the test items, develop an answer key, field test the items. Now you're going to field test them by giving them to your colleagues. You're going to upload them into a discussion board, which I will grade as pass-fail. You upload a test, you get 100. And that's it. Then there will be a second discussion board the following week, actually 2 weeks, because I'm giving you 2 weeks to create your test, where you will upload your answers to it and your suggestions for improvement. All of you are going to take 3, you're in groups of 4, you're going to take 3 tests. You're going to upload each one of them into a separate thread with your comments on how to improve, and I'll talk about that a little later. All right? So if you field test most of you won't get a chance to field test your items because you're a teacher, but in this case you are. And then as a final assignment, and I will talk about that later in the course, you're going to do an analysis of the test. It's going to be a three-part analysis. Part of it is going to be analyzing the test and what you would have had to reteach and why you feel you need to reteach that, or that they didn't get it right because the items were poorly written. And I will talk about that later on in the course. That's going to be towards the end of the semester that you will upload that document analyzing your test results and the process, talking about what you learned about creating tests and also what you learned about the EdTPA. And of course, revising and editing. You're going to revise and edit yours after your colleagues, your classmates take it for the first time and then give you suggestions for improvement. All right. So this is the blueprint I mentioned already. You have your learning targets on the left, and in your case, you're going to have 20 to 25 questions. So I said here 4 to 5 questions per target. But again, that depends on how much weight you want to give. You don't have to have 4 questions per target if you have 5 targets. You don't have to have 5 questions per target if you have 4 targets. That can vary, and I think it should vary based on what you think is important. All right. The last thing before creating your test that you need to do is create what Chapaway et al. Call propositions. Wiggins and McTighe in Backward Design, Understanding by Design, their book, they call them topical understandings. You can see in this graphic here, this picture, that enduring understandings are big ideas. For every unit that you teach, every lesson that you have, you should have a big idea, at least one overarching big idea. Now, a big idea is something that is not only important for what you're teaching right now, but it's something kids are going to need to be familiar with in the future as well. So it's a big idea. That's not what you're looking for in creating these tests. You're looking for topical understandings, which are statements, not goals or objectives. Those are your targets. Goals or objectives are your targets. Propositions are statements, and you're going to have many of them. And what's great about them, and here's one I just pulled out of the EdTPA Special Education. Candidates are required to submit the baseline data and the completed daily assessment record for each lesson for both learning targets. All right, that's a statement of understanding. This is something that anybody getting certified is going to have to do if they want to get certified in special ed. So that's a statement of understanding. You can see it's just a statement. It's a truism. Now you can see how easily you can convert that to a true-false statement, all right, or a multiple choice statement. Candidates are required to submit the baseline data and the following, and then you can say A, B, C, D, or you can make it a true-false sentence by just making that statement, or changing something, making it just one thing. Candidates are only required to submit the baseline data and the completed. Candidates are only required to submit the baseline data for both learning targets. False. Okay. Now, writing quality items, there's a lot of different criteria and rules for them. Here are some of them. Keep wording simple and focused. Ask a full question in the stem. Eliminate clues. That's using a or an, and then there's words beginning with consonants and words beginning with vowels. Take out any excessive wording. Make all 4, if you're doing a multiple choice, make all the alternatives plausible. If you're doing a matching, then they all should be similar items that you're matching. Of course, don't make the answer obvious. Highlight critical words like not. They recommend that you try to stay away from negatives, but sometimes it's okay. And best choice. Those are all critical words. You should highlight them. And then in the case of a teacher, have your friend or colleague, your teacher next door, your fellow math teacher, fellow reading teacher, read it for bias or read it for errors, or just like you're doing with each other right now. You're reading it and you're giving feedback to your colleagues. I also have a checklist which you will use when you're going over it. It's in course materials. You can see that there are guidelines for fill-ins. Whoops, wait a minute. Why is this? Wow. Big space there. You can see that formatting issues. I'm going to talk about some formatting issues right now. I'm going to go over this exemplar test and talk about some formatting issues. This is the last thing I'm going to talk about. You can see when you do a multiple choice test, you need to use in Microsoft Word, you need to use the numbering section here. Now you got to play with it, because once you start doing numbering, it'll number every paragraph. So you're going to have to go, when you start doing your stems, you're going to have to change it to letters. Notice how this is a hanging indent right here, that the number is separate, it's out, and then everything else is in line. You notice the choices are in line with the hanging indent. You have to play with, one of the things I do is this bar up here. I think where it says view, if you go to view on Microsoft Word, you have to click on ruler, and then you can use this ruler to play with the margins, all right? And that's important when you're creating these tests. One of the things that you also need to do, you notice that this question here is on 2 pages. You shouldn't do that. Put the cursor in front of the question, go to insert, and insert page break. And you'll see it'll put it on a different page. Okay, so you got a big space here. Wait a minute, put it on way too many pages. I'm going to go delete, and it'll bring it back up. All right, so that's how you, that's one of the rules. You have to have all your questions on one page, all of the question on one page. So you can see here, there's directions for true, false. You need to have a true or a false. I prefer them at the end. And I would say for questions, circle either true or false. It's simple directions. Your directions need to be clear. Like in multiple choice, it should say for questions 1 through 3, circle the best answer. Notice best is capitalized. Circle the best answer. So it doesn't necessarily be the only answer, but it's the best one. All right. When you do matching, notice that the matching, I think Chapaway and Stiggins et al., they say have your short version on the right side. I like to put the short ones on the left side, because then you can put your answer blanks here. So you put the answer, and then you tab. I would use tab, and then make your blanks. All right. Now there's a tricky part to making these 2 columns like this. And I really am not going to go into it right now. I should go into it right now. What you need to do is put your cursor where your matching is going to start, go into page layout, go into columns. You can see there's columns right here. And don't click on 2. Go down to where it says more columns. Now you highlight 2, and then you go this point forward, right? And then OK. That'll create 2 columns for everything after that. Well, if you're just starting, there's only going to be your matching. So you've got a couple questions above and nothing below. So when you get to the end of your matching, all right, you go back into columns, more columns. Now you click 1, and then you click from this point forward again. So then it will only have 2 columns for that section. So this section, you can see that everything else is 1 column. All right. So that's how you create matching, and that's how I would recommend doing it, formatting it. Again, true false. You need to have the true false afterwards, and then directions to circle it. All right. So if you organize, you can see that this person organized their test by the tasks or by the learning targets, and that's the way I would recommend it. Why do we do this? It's so you can look and see this person mastered task 1 but didn't master task 2. If you're just making random questions throughout your quiz, it's going to be very difficult for you to know what your colleague mastered. So that's basically what I'm expecting. Here I am, I'm editing again because the rubric has changed since the last course I taught in this spring. In this rubric, you'll notice that there's a section called question type. And to get a distinguished or a grade of 4 in this category, there has to be an equal mix of reasoning and knowledge questions. So it has to be at least 60-40. So when I say an equal mix, 60-40 is okay. So if 40% have to be reasoning questions, so that if in a 20 question test that would be 8 questions, in a 25 question test that would be 10 questions. So keep that in mind. And of course, it goes down in each for 3 and a 4 or in the lowest category. So what I'm looking for are questions that require an inference question, and on one of this, and the best way to do that is to go into the EdTPA rubrics. Most of you will be tempted to create questions that are low-level knowledge targets, like how many videos do you need, how long should this be, how many rubrics do you need. So okay, that's stuff that's good, but that is not going to get you deeper into the EdTPA. That will not help you pass the EdTPA. You need to write reasoning questions and go into the rubrics. So you list something and you say, a candidate did blah, 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 blah. This would be scored a 1, 2, 3, or 4 on the rubric for assessment. So that's what I'm looking for. Get into the rubrics, and because that's going to help you pass the EdTPA. Ask, and also in Chapter 5 in Chapaway, which I have in course materials, on page 139, there is item formulas for selected patterns of reasoning. So you have inferences, summarizing, compare and contrast, and making generalizations. So you can actually make those your learning targets. Students will be able to compare and contrast, yada, yada, yada. But these are making inferences. If most of you if you've read the Wiggins article on why we should stop bashing state tests, is because teachers do not know how to write questions where a student has to make an inference. After reading the passage, this is the main idea. That's making an inference. That's not asking a knowledge question of how many, which one, etc., etc. So you're going to have to write at least a minimum number of higher order questions to get a good score on that category. So keep that in mind. That's the last thing I have to say about creating this selective response test. Please use the resources. They're there to make so you will get an A+. I am going to give you feedback so you will get an A+. Your colleagues, your classmates are going to give you feedback so you can get an A+. But you have to use what we give you in order to make that happen. So good luck.